Welcome back, riders. With the flood of e-bikes on the market these days, it's nice to see that fierce competition between brands is forcing the price to come down, as well as lower-end bikes to include higher-end features and performance. The U7 from Vitilan is a good example of this situation. At the time of recording, this comes in at $1,250, considerably lower than most bikes I've tested so far, but includes features that I never expect at this price point and almost everything I ask for in the user interface. Far from perfect, but this unsuspecting little bike has impressed me with what it comes with out of the box, and I've been riding it for the past 2 weeks to give you my first impressions and tell you what I think. So here's what we got so far. The U7 is a step-through folding electric fat tire bike, and I realize this isn't a style for everyone. Step-throughs are usually not my first choice when I have an option, except for a few rare exceptions. However, I would like you to note the list of features that this bike comes with at this price point, as many of these are things I ask for on any electric regardless of its price. There's a lot of them, so hopefully I won't miss any, but these are in no particular order. Staying above the 15 amp hour sweet spot that I like to see on electrics, this 16 amp hour battery uses LG cells. The higher quality cells means a longer battery life with more charge cycles and the ability to deliver higher amperage for more power. Integrated head and tail light powered off the bike's internal battery so you don't have to charge them separately. The tail light is above average for brightness on most electrics I test, not the best but decent. The brake light uses separate LEDs from the tail light, so it gets quite a bit brighter when you apply the brakes. I find the headlight's brightness to be adequate in pitch black situations under most riding conditions. It has a really long throw for distance, allowing you to see quite a ways down the road. But unfortunately, the pattern is really narrow, making it tricky to see what's off to the side. This is made worse if you mount it to the front rack, because then it won't rotate when you turn the handlebars. So I would like to see a bit of an upgrade here. One of the best brake systems I've tested on any of my electrics so far, and considering the price, that's saying a lot. Full hydraulic front and rear, thumb screws on the adjustable levers for throw, quad piston calipers matched up to thick 180mm rotors. Not only is this great to see for safety and performance, but for the everyday rider, this is very convenient. No recognizable branding on the brake components, nor did I really expect one at this price point, but they don't feel spongy. They hit a nice solid wall and are very responsive. By now it seems like a given and a little bit repetitive, but I always have to mention the fat tires give a cushy ride feel gliding over little bits of road debris that you just don't feel. The conveniences of the alloy wheels capping these big tires is not to be overlooked. They do add a bit of weight compared to traditional spoked wheels, but not having to true rims in the future and replace spokes is a big benefit. Matched up to these wheels are something many of you know I love to see on any bike, whether or not it's electric: sealed bearings. No more cleaning, re-greasing, and adjusting cup and cone bearings. Might not sound like a big deal, but for the longevity of a bike, this is a major relief for headaches. The full coverage plastic fenders have kept me spotless even in the dirtiest riding conditions. The included rear rack has a pretty generous wide footprint, and they've even included an aluminum front rack. It's just a light-duty rack, not made for heavy cargo, but because it uses universal mounting points, you could always upgrade it in the future. Turning the key to the off position and removing it from the bike allows you to disable the electronics completely, an added security feature that I've come to appreciate. One click further allows you to unlock the battery and remove it from the bike as well. For the most part, they've done a great job with cable management, clustering all of the wires into a single run and then routing them internally through the frame. I would have liked to seen them use a rubber grommet for the pass-throughs on the frame. All the wires going through this one hole, it's pretty tight, and I fear that vibrations down the road might start to eat through some of these cables, which could be pretty catastrophic depending on which ones get damaged. So I'll probably add some protection here myself. I like the gear ratio on this bike. The oversized chainring in the front helps compensate for the smaller tires. I've found a comfortable cruising cadence at 18 miles an hour and can apply meaningful pedal assistance just over 20. Once you start to get above 22, then it's mostly ghost pedaling and the motor's going to be doing all the work. I did have to make a few small adjustments to the barrel nut out of the box to get shifting perfect, but it hasn't given me any issues since. On that note, the brake system was adjusted perfectly out of the box. I had zero rubbing from the pads on the rotors. Both latching systems for the folding frame and folding stem appear to be robust. After 2 weeks of relatively hard riding, I didn't find any play in either of these systems. The front suspension is about average for what I expect on most fat tire bikes. It does its job well of soaking up the hard impacts, has a little bit of back and forth play when you apply the brakes and rock the bike, but nothing out of the ordinary. It doesn't look or feel like it's going to fall apart or cause any issues, but could use an upgrade down the road. Although the convenience of a folding bike is not something I find myself using very often, one thing I really enjoy about this style of bike is the adjustable stem, allowing you to rise the handlebars to meet your shoulders at any position you want. This is just convenient for comfort, especially under long rides. One small niche I would like to point out that might affect some people: if you like to record your rides with chest-mounted cameras, this style of adjustable handlebars doesn't do anything to improve the view. Obviously at eye level it doesn't matter, but for the camera, well, it speaks for itself. They're using the standard seat you find on many electric bikes. I'm actually quite happy with this style of seat. I find it to be a good compromise between pedal assistance efficiency and motor-only comfort. For 5 to 10 mile trips around town going to work, it doesn't give me any issues, but I do find that after about 20 miles, as a slightly above average weight rider, it starts to burn. Now on to the meat and potatoes of this first impressions, the features of a bike which I either like to criticize or compliment. User interface and power delivery. Power delivery on the U7 impressed me immediately. I didn't expect this bike, especially at this price point, to have so much torque, but this thing is great for prolonged inclines or short bursts on steep hills. The bike's still capped at a top speed of 28 miles an hour, which is the legal limit. You may be able to play around and unlock it, because it certainly feels like this motor has more to give. But top speed aside, I have to compliment him on the acceleration. Great job for a 48-volt system. They are using the half-twist throttle with a stiff return spring that I complain about on a lot of electric bikes, but for a few reasons here in a moment you're going to find out why I just don't care. First, the throttle response is smooth. It gives you as much torque as you want at a moment's notice, but won't jerk you back and forth if you twitch the throttle when you hit a bump. Second, the throttle takes priority over pedal assist. This means if you're going fast with a high pedal assist level, but you need to slow down to maneuver around some obstacles, the speed controller will only give power to the motor based off of where you're holding the throttle, and will not activate pedal assist until you let go of the throttle completely. This makes maneuvering around obstacles at low speed operations very smooth and controllable. And third, this bike has an almost perfect cruise control system. It can be a bit tricky to activate under bumpy conditions due to the throttle moving slightly every time you hit something, but under smooth road conditions it's very nice. Unlike on most systems, you can actually set the cruise control while you're pedaling, so you can reach your perfect cadence and then hold the throttle steady for about 8 seconds and it'll turn on. Of course, this also means that the cruise control will not deactivate if you start pedaling, which is a positive in my opinion. Also, thanks to the throttle taking priority over pedal assist, it means if you start pedaling with the cruise control active, it won't jolt you up to a predetermined speed based off pedal assist. It just stays wherever you put it. And last but not least, for power delivery, the tune for the speed controller is really well done. Its cruise control stays very steady at whatever speed you put it to, aggressively applying power on uphill climbs, but smoothly tapering off so you don't have a back and forth pulsing sensation. The only suggestion I can give to make this even better is I would love to see a button to toggle the cruise control on and off so I don't have to fiddle around with trying to hold the throttle perfectly steady. It's not just a criticism for this bike, that's something I'd like to see on any bike. Moving on to the user interface, another area of e-bikes where I'm very critical, and they did a great job. I'll knock out my small complaint first. The big colorful display is pretty to look at in the right lighting conditions. Most of the time I can read it without issues, but when the sun hits it just right, I find it difficult to see the battery bar indicator. Me personally, until these e-bike displays start playing full-featured movies, and I'm not suggesting that they should, I would rather have a monochrome display because you can see those in pretty much any lighting conditions. We get a USB charging port underneath the display, thank you. We get fully customizable pedal assist levels, which are easy to set. The display is pretty intuitive, and you get up to 9 of them, allowing you to customize a pedal assist level for every gear on the cassette, and then some, so nothing's wasted. They give you a 5-button display pad, which is a little more intuitive as well for choosing options and adjusting levels, as well as a cruise control indicator, letting you know when it's activated, and a headlight indicator. You get a buzzer, which is fairly loud if you're using it on bike paths. Might be obnoxious compared to a bell, but I never use either, so I couldn't tell you one way or the other. They even went out of their way to include turn signals in the rear. Now, whether or not anyone would be able to tell which way you're going based off of these tiny turn signals, I doubt it, but having the wiring in place is nice because you could add aftermarket LED motorcycle turn signals, which are spread further apart and brighter, and then actually have an extra safety feature, so I'm not going to complain that it's there. Just that it's probably not implemented very well. For the build quality of the frame and its critical components, I have a few things to talk about here that I feel are important. This being a step-through bike, it's not super rigid. I don't have any issues with the frame's quality, the welds, or the gussets, but because this is a fat tire bike with a lot of torque and a decent top speed, I think this might deceptively cause people to think it can withstand more than it's capable of. The way I'm riding in this video is the most I would ever want to push a bike like this, and it's probably on the upper limit of that. Personally, I think the cushy tires on this bike are more for comfort and not for people to take off-road. And although the frame didn't give me any issues, the seat post did. Sadly, it appears that they've used a poor quality suspension seat post, and this is something I would recommend them to get rid of as soon as possible because this is otherwise a well-done bike at its price point. If you happen to have this bike, I would recommend upgrading to a solid post or a zoom suspension seat post. They're cheap, easy to install, and built better than what comes on the bike. After 2 days of testing, something inside failed because the seat started to rotate. It didn't affect me while I was riding the bike, but it made settling in when I would get on and off the bike rather cumbersome. But more importantly, at the end of my 2-week testing period, I noticed that the top of the suspension seat post had begun to bend backwards. This could be a catastrophic and dangerous failure if it snaps. Now, I realize that the quick flip-up seat makes it convenient for removing and installing the battery without adjusting your seat post, but honestly, that's not worth the risk in my opinion. I'm fairly certain there would be no issues getting a replacement seat post from Vitilan, but I'm more concerned about getting a better seat post than a replacement. As far as assembly goes, most e-bikes show a mostly assembled. A lot of them you'll have to install the front wheel and the handlebars, but on this bike all you have to do is install the left and right pedal, slide the front stem into place, which doesn't require any tools for that, but everything else is put together, including the front wheel. So, convenient for some riders. Although I reserve my official range test after owning a bike for a few months and putting many cycles on the battery, I will say this in my first impressions. Despite this bike's generous power delivery system, it's efficient. I took it to work for 1 week on a single charge, racking up over 30 miles, and still had 3 bars left on the indicator at the end of the week. I can safely say that unless you're gunning full throttle everywhere you go, this bike's minimum range estimation of 35 miles for a 200-pound rider is accurate. To sum up my first impressions of the U7 from Vitilan, I'm overly satisfied with this bike's power delivery, features, and user interface. Of course, I feel that suspension seat post is a flop and needs to be replaced immediately. I also fear that some riders might push this bike past its limits because of its power. But for riders who have a bit of restraint and understand exactly what they're buying, I think this is a great platform. So I hope you guys got some useful information out of today's video, or at the very least were mildly entertained. And until next time, ride safe.